Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Gateway to Translation presentation. This week, we have a five-star VC company with a five-star presenter in Francesco De Rubertis, and I'll introduce him a little more in just a second. In terms of me, I'm Terry Parlett, the Commercialisation Director, Deputy Head of Life Sciences here at Cambridge Enterprise. And for the uninitiated, I think probably many of you know Cambridge Enterprise. For those that don't, we are, for want of a better word, the commercialisation arm of the University of Cambridge. And we work with our academic partners to essentially take intellectual property and research out there to the market. And often that's via a licensing route, or that's via creating a new spin-out. And indeed, we've worked with Medicxi on some spin-outs here from Cambridge Enterprise in the past too. And of course, we've got David Granger, co-founder there in Medicxi, who's very much well known around Cambridge himself as well, with some 150 patents odd under his sort of belt as well. So, you know, we've got some great partners here. But we also do consultancy for those that want to know, and we also manage some of that ecosystem piece, and indeed a firm founder of Innovate Cambridge to try and bring the ecosystem together with business, industry, academia, and the health sector. Okay, right. Well, that's my little advert done. So let's think about then what we're talking about today. It's thinking about how a top VC firm like Medicxi, you know, looks at deals. How do they look at university research? And I think this is a great insight for any PI that's out there to think about what stage their technology might be at. And for that, Francesco is going to give that insight. You know, he's seen these before, many of these before. Francesco himself is co-founder and partner at Medicxi. Prior to that, for 19 years, he was at Index Ventures when he joined the firm in '97. And indeed formed co-founder of Medicxi in 2016. Under his leadership, that asset-centric approach to life sciences was conceived, adopted, and he serves on the boards of lots of those portfolio companies. So Centessa Pharmaceuticals, including technology from Cambridge under Morphogenics, Absyntex, for example, and indeed Exo1, which he was involved with in the past. But we've got Rivas Pharmaceuticals, Levacept, Alice Pharmaceuticals, and Kairos Biosciences. So, you know, really fantastic pedigree there, where he's sitting on the board and Medicxi have invested. Prior investments include Cellzone, GenMab, GenSight, Micromet, Minerva, Molecular Partners, Pan Genetics, Parallel Biosciences, Versatis, Profibrix, you name it. Francesco himself has got a BA in genetics and microbiology, and indeed a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Geneva as well. He's also conducted some of that postdoctoral research, so he knows what it's like to be in your shoes at one point, and that was at the Whitehead Institute at MIT. So I think without further ado, let's go and get that insight from Francesco, and I'll hand over to you, Francesco, to take everyone through what Medicxi is, first of all, and then how you view some of the university technology coming out and some insights for our PIs. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Terry, for the introduction. Thank you to the organizers for having invited me. I'm really very happy to be here. I will try to share what I've learned over the last 27 years. Indeed, I've been doing this for 27 years. 27 years ago, I was in a molecular biology lab. And I decided to found with some friends at that point of mine a venture capital firm. The name of that venture firm was Index Ventures, and we founded that in Geneva. I cannot say that we founded it in Geneva for very, strategic reasons, really thinking this through. It was just that we met in Geneva. I had done my PhD in Geneva, so we met socially in Geneva. And then we decided that Geneva was a good enough place to start a venture firm. And since then, of course, we have expanded. And today we are, thank God, we are one of the large venture firms in Europe. And I'll try to drive you, I only have got a dozen slides. I'll try to drive you through the general framework that we go through. But then I'm very keen, you guys obviously must be very sophisticated, very smart, bright scientists. So I would really limit my part of the game to half of it, maybe half an hour, to give you some general framing about how we look at things. But I am certainly very, very much looking forward to interactions with you on the second half an hour to really see how I can be most relevant. And I will try to be almost boringly pragmatic in the kind of things that I'm going to share, because of course I could really give you very high, big vision, believe in what you have. Oh my God, it's going to be the best thing ever. But, and that is all true, but let's say that is done. I will really try to reduce it to where the pragmatic challenges of getting access to venture capital come into place. Because I was a molecular biologist many years ago, and I decided to create this firm exactly because there was a very big disconnect or distance. This was back in the mid-90s. There was a very big disconnect and distance between the labs, the research environment, and then the company creation environment, especially in Europe, But so let me try to start to go in order. I'll try to share the few slides that I have. Okay, let me say a few things about Medicxi. And by the way, David Granger got cited. He's, of course, former professor of molecular medicine at Cambridge University. He's a co-founder of Medicxi. And the little nugget I wanted to give you, I don't know, Terry, if you even yourself, if you know, the D here that you see in Medicxi, the D stands for David. So the D is for David. So you can tell him next time that you see that you knew that he was a co-founder, but you did not know that his name is in the Medicxi name. I won't tell you the other names. M stands for Michel, one of the other co-founders, but there is a history behind his name that looks like an Italian made-up name. No, it's much more complicated than this. But so you know, a big nugget that you can share with David when you see him. So let me move forward. As I said, we started in mid-97, early 98, Index Ventures. That was really focused on two things, technology and biotechnology. My partners were doing technology investments, and I was doing biotechnology investments. And then as we grew, the company became, Index Ventures became really big. And so in 2016, we decided to divide the firm in two parts, Index Ventures, the main Index Ventures technology, and Index Ventures Life Sciences that we renamed Medicxi. Okay. Today, Medicxi, and I will just speak about Medicxi, of course. Index Ventures Life Sciences got renamed. It doesn't exist anymore. And Medicxi is completely separated from Index Ventures. So Medicxi is one of the large firms today in terms of venture capital in Europe. So we have created a European platform for entrepreneurs in Europe, not because of any kind of geopolitical, reasons, Europe against the US, not at all. It's just because the unmet need of having company creation know-how is in Europe really, really big. In the US, it's much more advanced, sophisticated. There is a lot of infrastructure for entrepreneurs to create company in the US. We decided many years back that in Europe, there was going to be a need. And by the way, just one remark that I would like to make is just for you guys to realize the relevance that European pharmaceutical research, academic and pharmaceutical research has. Every year, 25 to 30% of the drugs that every year get approved by the FDA every single year, a quarter to a third of them come from Europe, were discovered in labs, academic labs, and Cambridge is, of course, is a case study in European research. But academic labs, research labs, a third of all the FDA-approved drugs every year. So there is a supply of know-how, science, knowledge, which is absolutely really relevant. But in terms of platforms for know-how on how to create companies and prosecute companies at a venture capital level, it's really very much underserved if you compare it to the US. And in order, this platform for entrepreneurs, we have solidified or given or brought a specific value added in this platform for entrepreneurs by really connecting and pairing in a very dominant, very important way with pharmaceutical companies. GSK, Novartis, J&J, they are all major stakeholders in our platform. They do not own the molecules that we invest in. They are stakeholders in the infrastructure that we have created. And even Verily, the Google Life Sciences arm, has invested many tens of millions of dollars in our platforms. So this is all to say we have created a platform that today can be described in this way. We have almost 40 employees, 5 partners, 3 offices. London is the large one with more than 20 people in the office. Then a dozen people in Geneva, where I'm sitting in. So I run Medicxi, but I'm sitting in the Geneva office of Medicxi. And then we have a small office that really takes care of all the accounting functions in Jersey, which is really a jurisdiction that has created this friendly for fund management approaches. Another slide that describes in a little bit in a more science relevant way is really the output that we've had to date from Medicxi. From Medicxi, we have created about 80 companies, investing in about 150, 160 molecules. Of these molecules, 9 got to the market. And I would say this is really the metrics that shows our relevance, right? The relevance of venture capital, not just Medicxi. The job of really interacting or interfacing or being intermediaries between the brain trust that is in research labs that think all day about new science and new approaches, and then the translational work that really connects to pharma companies who are really the implementation muscles of drug development. They know how to execute, they know how to run on a highway. The science and the early stage translational efforts are really more how to get on the highway. And for that kind of effort, you need a kind of infrastructure which is phenotypically different than the pharmaceutical infrastructure. This is why we as venture capitalists have a role in that intermediary job between research and implementation. Research being academia and research institutes, and implementation being pharmaceutical companies. In terms of coverage on the ground, these yellow spots represents really the places, the research labs, academic labs from where most of our molecules, the molecules that we see, not the molecules that we've invested in. This is a fingerprint of where we see molecules coming from. And you will hear me talking about molecules as a proxy for technological innovation. So we see, and this is important that you realize, that as a venture firm, by the way, there are maybe 5 to 10 venture capital firms that cover 80% of the deal flow in Europe. In other words, there is an 80% probability that 1 of 10 venture capitalists are behind one of the companies that got created in Europe. To say that is a very concentrated market, as opposed to the American market, which is a very fragmented market. In the US, there is maybe a couple of hundred venture firms that cover the US ground. Again, here we are less than a dozen venture firms that have the big market share in Europe. There is many venture firms in Europe as well, but that are below critical mass and below institutional roles. So we see a company like Medicxi sees 1 to 2,000 proposals a year, okay, molecules/ideas, 1 to 2,000 a year. We invest in a few. I will show you the funnel in a second. But these ideas come from about 15 regions in Europe, and there are 36 hotspots, hubs, from which there is a disproportionately high number of ideas that come from, okay? And this is our job on the ground. I told you we're about 37, 38, so we cover these areas. But of course, it's not just us. We have got our inner network that are widespread in Europe, that basically bring to us and tell us what is happening in that university, in that research institute, or in that company. This is really the operational model that we have. And this is specific to Medicxi. There are other venture firms, and of course, many of you may be very familiar with the venture capital scene and environment. There are many venture firms that have a different approach. We have a very operationally grounded kind of approach. The 2,000 ideas come through the left hand. You see here on the left hand of the model, they come to our ideas, to our platform. Our platform is constituted mainly by the 37 people that, of course, represent the analytical engine, the due diligence platform, the research platform that we have internally in these two offices. But then there is about 20 drug hunters, TA experts, which are people that work with us exclusively, basically. Some of them not contractually exclusively, but operationally exclusively. There are people, you see David Granger at the top up there, that are really big experts in specific domains, in specific spaces. And they have a really key role because our operational model, our investing model is really operationally centered. In other words, I will show one slide down, more granularity. But once one of those ideas or molecules really gets the profile match of interest for us, I'll give you some parameters on what is interesting to us. But once there is an initial profiling that says, yes, this could be interesting, that kind of subset of ideas get sent into the hands of the drug hunters or TA experts, depending on their therapeutic area expertise, depending on their focus, on one of these 19. And that is really a very key important factor. Everybody's got experts, but these are really tightly connected experts to us. They are part of the platform. These are not people that we know in the industry. These are really part of the platform. I told you, David has got even his name in Medicxi. But once we really spend time on the reduction to practice of that idea, that is something which is important. It's not very romantic. It's not very visionary. We need to have a visionary idea, but then we need to really put it through the filter of, okay, between this brilliant idea and the implementation that needs to be done of this brilliant idea, what is the gap? What is the path? What is the distance measured in terms of time and dollars from any measurable progression of the idea? That is really something that we need to do with the experts, with really the people that have operationally built companies, run companies, failed with companies. And this is really an important resource that we have. And then you see also on the far right, you see also that box, which is wet labs. I don't know if you can see my arrow moving. Alessandro, can you tell me? Yes. The wet labs, these are what it means. Wet labs, these are labs which are not owned by Medicxi, but were founded years ago by some of the people that are on this central box. And even though they are now independent shops, Air Accelerate is there in Cambridge. So I'm sure that many of you or some of you have interacted with Air Accelerate. It was founded by David. We use these wet labs as really strategic outfits where we test immediately ideas that really get us excited, or some things that really are very exciting to us. Once we have decided that from a theoretical, analytical standpoint, these things really make sense and is very exciting, we also often, not all the times, but we often check, we go immediately to these wet labs to double check with experiments, really if observations are really robust or very fragile, because that will add absolutely fundamental determinant value to our due diligence. So they are part of the due diligence platform, these wet labs. So you can understand the value added. As a venture capitalist, I don't have to make a judgment call only on the beautifully drafted PowerPoint slide. But once that is, gone through successfully, I can also ask my wet lab exceed, hey, for a few $1,000s and 3 days, can you do this check for me? And because we are strategically linked to them, of course, we can get turnaround very quickly. So this is really a secret weapon that we use routinely in order to validate or to expand observations when there is an orthogonal experiment or animal model that could be used in order to increase our level of confidence in a certain observation. We do that very quickly without having to really engage a CRO, go through the formal, confidentiality and contracting. There is really an arm's length, easy and quick way of connecting with these shops. On this slide, I really wanted to show a little bit more the prosecution platform. We have a specific model in that we focus on molecules. So platforms, diagnostics, services, devices. Devices is less really coming from academia, but other approaches that can come from academia are less relevant for us. So our business model is really focused on molecules, on chemical leads. We have about 1,000 to 2,000 new ideas a year. We really select 10 to 20 every year for not really for full investment. We get excited about 10 to 20, and we start, seeding with very little capital, maybe a few $100,000, to really confirm with an experiment or expand a little bit the observation, or really having a very tight control on the cash. We really test 10, 20. It's almost final due diligence, if you want. But then a subset of those 10 to 20 really mature in an investment by Medicxi. So we indeed invest in 2, 3, 4 companies a year out of the 1 to 2,000 a year that you see. Once we've invested, we put the molecules on our platform, the platform that you've seen in the previous slide. So we create, together with the scientist that usually is in academia, with the founding scientist, we create what we call a SWAT team. Must be somewhere here. I didn't put the execution teams that we call internally, SWAT teams, which are project-focused, task-focused team of Medicxi drug developers that really support, complement, expand, help, surrogate the scientific founders that usually are scientific visionaries, but most of the times they're not drug developers. So that disconnection or that gap between having a brilliant scientific insight and translating that into a operationable, feasible drug development program, that is where our platform of MDDs can really become a very important, almost necessary support function. We have the affiliated labs, and we use also external infrastructure. In addition, we have those pharmaceutical companies that you've seen are our partners. We have created SABs where these top guys are available to our budding scientists, entrepreneurs, to really coach and nurture them. And then the final point about the model is really this. If you look step 1 to step 5, step 1, you understand there is again, I really talk in terms of asset-centric, drug-centric, but it can be a new target, it can be a new insight. Once there is the idea, that basically we decide it's exciting for us, then we go to creating the company around this idea. And the company has to be a pure play. So it has to be a focused company around that specific insight or the specific idea or that specific molecule. Focus more than diversification. That is really something which is going to be very different across venture capitalists. There are some VCs, with totally legitimate approach, that we want to diversify their risk by having several products, several targets, several ideas in the same company from the get-go. Very understandable approach. Our approach is the polar opposite of that. We really want to focus on whatever the insight that the scientist has. It's really a focused play rather than a diversified play. And then we're going to finance 100% of the project cost. But we're going to finance 100% of the project cost. We call it with a rolling carpet financial model. In other words, when the scientist comes, let's say the scientist that really got us excited about the idea that he or she is working on, we decide that $30 million, $40 million, $27 million is required to go from that idea into a point which it cannot be argued anymore if it's relevant or not. It's demonstratively relevant. Of course, best case scenario is when you can produce phase 2 data that is objective to everybody. But most of the times that is too far out. So we need to find earlier time points where the idea that was a visionary idea in the head of the scientist can become demonstrable to third parties that are not going to be as expert as any of the academic scientists in a specific sector. So that, let's say that we discuss $30 to $40 million to accomplish the objective. That $30 to $40 million gets secured, gets allocated, gets reserved for that company, but it does not get invested. Does not get invested because that would be a waste of capital. It will be there and invested as soon as I'm saying in step number 5, as soon as the next experiment shows that it's worth going to the next level. So what the scientists and us will do, those $30 million, we will design the 5, 6, 10 steps which represent the serial de-risking approach to getting to the outcome. The outcome, it can even be a late preclinical candidate and doesn't need to be proof of concept in humans. But whatever is the proof of concept, again, the data point that will speak to external people. We will decide, what is it, 5, 6, 7 experiments. The scientist and us, our MDD, our Medicxi drug developer, will design this sequence. And then the experiment will be funded one after the other. The first experiment will take 6 months. Here is the first $2 million. The second experiment, if positive, will be automatically funded. It will be, so it's a rolling carpet. And the reason for doing this is really pure financial reasons. It's not being cheap, but it's really that how venture capital works. If I allocate $40 million into an idea and I invest that money into a company, and that company $3 million later shows to me that actually the experiment is not going well, those $37 million that I've invested in that company but that are not going to be used, I cannot reinvest them in another project. They've been used. It's almost like saying $3 million have been written off and $37 million have not been used. So because of that reason, of course, it makes no financial sense whatsoever to invest ahead of when it's needed, other than for hedging risk kind of things, but it doesn't need to be $37 million to hedge a $3 million bet. That is non-financial. That is not economics, and that makes no sense. And then I would like to switch gears on the last 2 slides before we open up to the conversation, to the questions, to what is the single most important reason why academic spin-outs do not happen when venture capital gets called. What is the single most important information that scientific academic founders, scientific academic scientists that want to found a biotech company, when they fail, the single most important reason is the following. And I will close on this because that is going to open up the conversation, I think. This is the key determinant. The key determinant is shown in this slide, which is something which is boring. It's just logistics. It's something that an academic scientist does not even realize it exists, and is the most important feature that will determine if yes or no a venture capitalist like Medicxi or any venture capitalist can invest in that academic spin out or not. Let me explain what you're seeing on this slide. Venture capitalists are not rich people that are investing out of their wallets saying, oh yeah, I like this idea, I think that guy is smart, let me send money. No, that is business angels, okay? God bless business angels, but business angels have got one value, but they do not have the muscles to carry forward companies all the way through. A venture capital firm is an institutional firm. An institutional firm means a firm that is regulated. It's a regulated firm. In other words, the cash, we've got billions of dollars available to invest in academic spin-outs. But we have to invest them according to certain guidelines and rules that are part of a document, which is called the LPA, the Limited Partners Agreement. You don't care to know what it is, the LPA. I need to care what is the LPA. The LPA is the document that basically gives me the guidelines of what I can and what I cannot do. What I can do is invest in all companies that you think are great. That seems really like great latitude, right? But there are some goalposts, and these goalposts are a dominant limitation for what I can do. And most of the times, academic spin-offs don't play well in that goalpost. And this is the single most important goalpost that you need to be aware. And I'm saying you in the idea of scientific, academic scientists that may think one day of starting up a company. A venture capital person like myself manages funds, okay? It's wallets. A fund has got a lifetime. When I pull together a new fund, I have agreed in those guidelines, which are in the timelines, which are in the guidelines that I signed, the LPA, that my fund has got a life of 10 years, okay? The 10 years fund life, you know, it starts here, year 1, it finishes here in year 10. It basically means the following, that I've got 10 years to do whatever I like in biotech. Of course, I cannot buy cars for myself. I need to invest in biotech, this cash, right? But as long as it's invested in biotech, I can do whatever I want. That is my power, my freedom to operate. I like the idea that Alessandro presents to me. I can invest if I like the idea. If I don't like the idea, I don't have to invest. However, this 1 to 10 years is non-negotiable for me, which basically means that the LPs, the investors, put money in my funds on the condition that by year 10, I have invested in companies, grown the companies, demonstrated the value of the technologies, and sold the companies to pharmaceutical acquirers or brought them into the public markets, is what we call exited the companies. So I need to enter in investment, develop the investment, and exit the investment, knowing that by year 10, whatever is not exited is basically closed, okay? So year 10 is really a scary flag that I have in my things. Now, we all know biotech, right? Assuming that I meet you come to see me and you've got a fantastic idea, and you are, unless you really meet me on the first year of the fund, you meet me on year 2, on year 3, statistically. Let's say if you meet me in year 5, then there is not even a fund. But if you meet me on year 2 or year 3, and I like your idea, I do the investment. This basically means that by year 7, year 8 of my fund, I need to start pulling together the results. Okay, sorry, I want to use you, Alessandro, as the sparring partner, because I see you here. You are the person that I have in front of me. I don't see anybody else. Alessandro, we need to start wrapping up. How is the technology working? We need to sell to Roche, Novartis. We are in year 7, year 8. Next year, I need to liquidate, or year after at latest. Now, if we are in year 7, year 8, and I've invested in year 2, year 3, this means that there is really 3, 4, 5 years to invest and for your technology idea to come on the other side of demonstration of value. With this, or actually I will not be able to invest. It can be whatever incredible idea it is, but if it's more than 5 to 6 years to fruition, then it's something the venture capital will not be able to. Sure, it can be 7, 8 years, of course, but I'm talking about statistically. So if you have this parameter in mind, you realize yourself that 80% of the things that we get sent are not by definition possible for us. A basically great new idea on a target that is not even yet cloned, or a target that has no validation whatsoever, is just a hint. I can believe that the hint is right, but unless I believe that 5, 6 years later I will be able to transact globally on that asset, is not qualified. So when you think, and by the way, maybe I can stop sharing because I will not have any more slides. When you start thinking, okay, I've got a brilliant idea, I need to start calling, the company creator kind of parties or stakeholders that are out there, to start realizing, if they like my idea or not. Just start thinking in your own mind, with your own knowledge of the program, when would be clear demonstration of relevance for the industry, of course, right? Because if you go into company creation, you need to have a pharmaceutical angle of interest. When will that be really possible? Optimistic scenarios and more realistic scenarios. And if it's really more than 6, 7 years, by definition, a VC cannot invest. And there are some VCs that maybe will invest because they do not realize really the timelines and things. But the problem that is really pushing the problem to a later moment, because when VCs become in year 10, You can be in the middle of your best experiment to be done, and that will show the world that you have Nobel Prize winning technology, but the VC will need to liquidate their funds. So there will be no questions asked. It's legal obligations. So that is really something. It's as I was saying, not really, oh, which scientists are these VCs interested? Why is these VCs not interested in stem cells? Or there is this dominant parameter, which is as boring as it gets, which is taking away 80% of the deal flow immediately out of our way. I wanted to share this because this is something that maybe is directly relevant, because in terms of therapeutic areas, in terms of space and focuses, anything that goes into those timelines and then can be demonstratable, it all falls within focus of venture capital. Medicxi only molecules, of course, not platform technologies for validations or measuring monitorings, but approaches to drug discovery. I would stop there because I see we have 20 minutes. I've got a few minutes I can go over, but I'm sure that many of you have got hard stops. So Terry, happy to hand over to you for moderation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Francesco. And so I hope everyone's got a really good understanding there, perhaps very much a helicopter view, which I appreciate. But to understand how Medicxi filters those technologies that come through, but particularly those last messages, and thinking about the timeline, that 5 to 7 years. This is that's where we need to exit in terms of if you're a VC, that's what you're thinking about. So